Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Today's learning is sponsored in memory of Chaim Slavit, Chaim ben Don HaKohen, sponsored by Barry Steinberg, Shomer Shavan Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay, so we're learning Mishnah, Nazir, Perek Vav, Chapter 6, Mishnah Hey, Mishnah 5. So the first thing the Mishnah is going to mention is something we've already mentioned before. It's meant to be an introduction to the rest of the Mishnah. Shloisha minim asurin benazir. There are three kinds of things that are forbidden by a nazir. Hatuma, becoming impure through a dead body. Vatigalachas, cutting his hair. Vayotzim and agefen, and consuming anything that comes from the vine. These are the three categories. These are the three things that a nazir may not do. Now, the Mishnah is going to contrast these different things to show a stringency that some have over the others. So the Mishnah begins, Chaymer batuma betigalachas b'yetzim min hagefen. There is a stringency that we find both by the prohibition of becoming impure through a dead body and cutting hair, a stringency by both of them that do not exist, and do not exist by the product of the vine. What is that? Shatuma vatigalachas seisrin. Because becoming impure from a dead body and cutting one's hair, seisrin, causes a nazir to forfeit days of the naziris he already observed. He's got some of the days, both of them, as we'll explain in a second, have a halacha, have a law that days already been observed will be basically, so to speak, canceled and have to be made up. But if he consumes anything that comes from the vine, any kind of grape product, that does not undo any of the days that he kept. Now, if the Torah says explicitly, if a Kohen becomes impure from contact or any source of tumah, impurity that comes from a dead body, the Torah says explicitly, you gotta start over. And it doesn't make a difference whether he did it intentionally, accidentally, he's gotta start the whole thing over. If he took upon himself a 500-day Naziris, and this happened on day 499 and a half, he is going to have to start all over again.
The
whole thing. Now, when it comes to cutting one's hair, there it's not as broad. Cutting one's hair does not cancel what he did until now, other than the fact that, as we mentioned, a nazir cannot cut his hair unless he has a 30-day growth. And therefore, if the majority of his hair was cut at some point, and let's say it was a 30-day naziris, and his hair was cut, and he cut his hair. In other words, his hair was cut in day 20, right? So he's going to have to keep, and now so he does 10 more days, and he got to do another 20. So he's got to have a 30-day growth. So both the tumah, this is something we learned previously. So both the impurity and the cutting one's hair have this halacha that to some degree they could undo the days that have already been observed. However, when it comes to drinking wine, even if the nazir deliberately drinks wine, and for that he's going to receive lashes, according to Torah law, it does not affect any of the days of his naziris. Does not cancel any of the days. It keeps going. We learned previously that midrabanan, the sages actually penalized him that the days that he drank, he's got to make up. But that's a rabbinic law. That's not a Torah law. So therefore, you've got a characteristic that you have a stringency by impurity and hair cutting, that they're seisrin, that they, so to speak, undo. They cancel some of the days. They have the possibility of canceling days already observed, while the grapevine product, ein seisr, does not do so. Now, the opposite way. But there's a stringency that we find by the grapevine products over becoming impure or cutting one's hair, or having one's hair cut. When it comes to grapevine products, there is never an exception to the rule that allows it for a Kohen, Nazir, to be able to partake. So, for instance, the Torah implies that a Nazir may not drink wine, even if there is a mitzvah to do so. For example, he swore to drink wine. So any other person has an obligation to keep that oath. Not the Nazir, can't do it. Mm-hmm. Now, there are other things that are not Torah obligations. Making Kiddush, making Havdalah over a cup of wine. Those are not Torah obligations. Excuse me? Yarbakosis. All these things are rabbinic obligations, and of course the Nazir won't be able to partake of them. But even in a situation where there is a Torah obligation actually to drink wine, he's not going to be able to do so. So that's what it means that when the product of the grapevine, is never permitted as an exception. However, the Tuma b'tigalachas hutru b'klalan. We have examples, though, where the prohibition of becoming impure or having one's hair cut are actually permitted. They become a exception to the rule. What are those exceptions? B'tigalachas mitzvah. I'm just going to translate it first. When it comes to a situation where getting one's hair cut is a mitzvah, of a mace mitzvah, or a mace mitzvah, a person has no one to bury him. So, tigalachas mitzvah means like this. Where a mitzvah, person is stricken with tsaras. So when the tsaras, when he gets to the point, the Torah states that a mitzvah must shave all his hair as part of his purification process. Meaning, he became a Nazir. The tsaras goes away. He has to now go through a purification process. That purification process includes shaving all his hair. That's a mitzvah. If a person is stricken with tsaras, this is what he has to do. If a Nazir became a mitzvah and needs to purify himself, the positive commandment to shave the hair of a purifying mitzvah overrides a negative commandment against shaving a Nazir. That is the principle that we call asay doichalois asay. A positive commandment can override a negative commandment. Again, there's lots of parameters and qualifications to that. But over here, here is an example where the asay, the positive commandment of a person who was a mitzvah and has to go through the purification process, has a mitzvah to cut off all his hair, that applies even to a Nazir. So here we have an example of a Nazir where the prohibition of hair cutting is permitted. The example of Meis Mitzvah is the example of the exception to the rule of a Nazir becoming tamei from a dead body. The Nazir says, a Torah says explicitly by a Nazir, his father, his mother, his brother, his sister, etc., he may not become tamei to. He may not. But what we derive from that is that those relatives, he may not, but a Meis Mitzvah, which means a dead body, that it's a specific mitzvah to bury because there's no one else to bury him. He's very, the classic example that's used, it's not right now, example is used in the Mishna is you're traveling on the road, there's a dead body right there. So what do? So there was no one to call then, necessarily to pick up the body and bring it to a cemetery. Or I shouldn't, whatever it is. But the point is, you're supposed to bury the Meis Mitzvah right there. Where you find him is where you're supposed to bury him. So if the Nazir finds his dead body there, there's no one around, he has a mitzvah to bury him. So those are the examples where you find exceptions to the rule, exceptions to the prohibition that apply both to hair cutting and to becoming impure from a dead body. Those are examples where those prohibitions have exceptions to the rule, but there is no such thing as an exception to the rule by a Nazir that will allow him to drink wine, at least from the point of regular permission because of some other mitzvah. Now, but then the Mishnah goes an example of a stringency that tuma, that the prohibition of becoming tamei, impure from a dead body, exists there but doesn't exist by hair cutting. What is that? Shatuma seiseres es hakol v'chayaven aleh carbon, as we said before. Becoming impure by a Nazir will knock off everything that he did. It will cancel everything that he did until now. He's got to do it over again, and he's got to bring a special carbon for being tamei. A Torah says a Nazir becomes impure even accidentally. At the end of the day, that makes him have to start all over again. Before he can start all over again, he's got sacrifices he has to bring. So that's what happens there. V'tigalachas When it comes to hair cutting will only cancel up to 30 days, meaning, as we said before, you got to make sure that you have a growth of hair of 30 days before you can end your Naziris term, and therefore, the most you could undo from what has been done until now is 30 days. The ein carbon, but there's no sacrifice you have to bring for that. You just have to make up the days to make sure that you have that 30-day growth. And therefore, that's the example of where Tuma is more stringent than hair cutting. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So it's because the wine is